welcome to the Great Northern Retail Forum in partnership with the Giftware Association. Now, up next, we have someone who's very close to my heart and I know extremely well. I'd like to introduce you to the chairman of the Giftware Association, Henri Davis.
Thank you, Dave. Well, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's session. I'm going to spend some time talking to you about the importance of recognizing and understanding the implications of social, economic, and business trends. I'm Henri Davis, as David says. I'm the new chairman of the Giftware Association. And my day job is working within the card, gift, stationery, and heritage sectors as an independent retail advisor. I'm not the first woman to take on this role, but I am the first retailer. And I hope that in my 2 years as chairman of the GA, I can make a real difference to retailers' perceptions of the Giftware Association. I'd just like to spend 1 minute giving you an idea about the work that we do. The Giftware Association, otherwise known as the GA, is a national body and the only one representing the gift and home industry. Our commitment is to help members make money, and save time by offering a wide selection of services and support. People are often quite surprised that trade associations still exist, thinking they have no relevance in today's business world. But actually, I would suggest that nothing is further from the truth. And the pressures and opportunities that something like Brexit will present to suppliers and retailers in the gift and home industry are a good example of exactly where a trade association can make a difference. As an association, and with our national committee members, we will keep on top of all the developments as they materialise, researching the issues relating to the various areas of our expertise, lobbying government where appropriate to make sure our members' issues are put across and understood. All of the information we gain during this period will be shared with our members, and the pooling of our resources and information and expertise become a rich source of resource for anyone within the Giftware Association. My colleagues Sarah, Dave and Simone are here at the show, based either around the forum or out in the tents meeting exhibitors and retailers. So if at the end of this presentation or at any time in the future you decide that you might like to become a member of the Giftware Association or understand a bit more about what we do, then please get in touch. So, this session is about the importance of understanding trends. People often hear the word trend and think it only relates to design and colour. And of course, design and colour and inspiration are absolutely critical in the gift and homeware industry because we are very design-led. But it isn't the only thing that will influence the success of your business. And I would suggest that actually every business needs to understand the social, economic and business trends going on around them and then decide how they're going to act if they are to make the most of the opportunities that they present or indeed manage the risks. And Brexit, of course, is going to be a really good example of that. I don't have a crystal ball like anybody else, but as we work our way through this period of change, it's going to be really critical that each of us evaluate our businesses to make sure we understand the implications and take informed decisions about what we need to do next. And of course, that is all about staying competitive. If you're not watching out for these change in trends, you can be absolutely certain that your competitors are. What is critical is that you're aware of the trends, that you have considered them, identified the ones that are relevant to you, your business, and your customers, and then make sure that you make informed decisions as to how you're going to act. Because if you don't, you can absolutely guarantee that your competitors will, and that will put them one step ahead of you. So the first thing I'd like to think about is actually consumers. We all need consumers in our businesses. They're the things that keep the money coming in the till if you're a retailer. And of course, if you're a supplier, your consumers are actually the retailers buying product from yourselves. So let's have a little bit of a think about where we are today here in July in Harrogate and the sorts of things that have been going on in the market recently and how consumers have been reacting. Some of you may have heard the footfall figures that were announced this morning, saying that in June the retail footfall figures were down by 3%. Now that's not all because of Brexit, because of course that vote came in the fourth week of the month. We were already seeing a downward trend in footfall figures, which you can blame on wet weather, sunny weather, whichever way you want to cut it. The reality was that the Brexit vote only built on a trend we were seeing in June, which was that people were spending less money. But of course it's very early days and we can't second guess what's going to happen next. What I'd like to highlight is actually some of the trends that we've seen in terms of consumer spending over the last couple of years, and think about actually how you make the most of those trends, because in the short term I think it's unlikely that they will change very much. One of the biggest changes that we saw actually coming out of the recession in 2008 has been people shopping much more frequently and spending less. And of course there can be some real advantages to that as long as they're spending with you. The key is to make sure that when people are out on the high street, however little they're spending, they're coming into your shop as a retailer rather than going next door. And that can be done in many ways. One of the things, of course, is encouraging consumers to come back to you by offering some sort of a loyalty scheme. It doesn't have to be anything as sophisticated as Tesco's or Paperchase with their plastic cards that you're scanning through tills. It can be simple cards that you stamp at a till point, as they do in so many of the coffee chains these days. Or it can be about relevant upselling. I don't mean offering a chocolate bar at with every single transaction, but for me, working in the card and gift industry, actually upselling can be quite straightforward and take a card purchase at maybe £2.50 up to a purchase of nearer £5. And the more you do that, obviously the more it drives your sales because you're building your ATV. Make sure that if you've got teams working in your shops, that your staff are really comfortable with doing those sorts of add-on sales, be it tags and sellotape with wrapping paper, be it stamps with cards, even a pen to help them write that last-minute card so they can post it then and there. If people are on your high street and they're shopping little and often, it also means that at certain times you may have a lot more people in your shop. That's great news, but it's only great news if you've got people available to serve them. There's nothing more frustrating than customers coming into your shop and actually leaving empty-handed because they're not prepared to stay in the queue. So think about those patterns of transactions that you're seeing, and if actually there are busier times of day, do you actually need to have more people available to help your customers for those couple of hours? One of the other impacts of people shopping more regularly on a high street is that they will expect to see more new product in your shops more often. And if you're here today at Harrogate buying lots of new product, it might actually be reasonable to think about phasing some of the deliveries of that product into your store so that actually you've got new product to display every 2, 3 or 4 weeks rather than it all coming in one go. And of course that means refreshing your windows and your displays. So this change in consumer behaviour to shopping little and often has a big impact actually on the way that potentially you want to run your business going forward. And it's not just small independent retailers it affects as well, because it's for people like the big supermarkets, they are fundamentally changing the size of their retail outlets and coming into C stores on local high streets rather than having the big 24 extras that they've had in the past. So this change in shopping habit affects absolutely every element of the retail industry. So if consumers are out there shopping little and often, and you're trying to make them spend more with you on every occasion, one of the other dynamics you need to consider is what's happening with the competitors on your high street. Think about who your competitors really are. I would argue a bit of healthy competition actually does us no harm at all, in that it makes sure that we're upping our game and staying on the front foot rather than being complacent about what's going on. One of the biggest brands to hit our high street and grow really rapidly is Tiger. The Scandinavian brand, the IKEA but on the high street, brightly coloured products, fantastically well priced, and very significant in terms of stocking filler type product at Christmas. They're certainly giving us a run for our money on our local high streets. But of course the upside is that actually if you've got a Tiger on your high street, it's also driving fantastic footfall along those pavements. The key is, how are you going to take advantage of that to make sure that you're getting some of that spend and footfall and it's not all going to them? What I would suggest is that you keep an eagle eye on what they're doing. Make sure that you're going in there quite frequently to understand the product mix they've got, the type of items that they're offering, and most importantly, the price points, because that's where they really seem to be hurting us most. Think about, if you're thinking about other competitors on your high street, look at the suppliers that they're dealing with. Are there other alternatives that you could be stocking to differentiate your outlet from those of your competitors? What can you do in terms of pricing? Should you be thinking about promotions and offers to, again, separate yourself from your competitors? And also the level of service. Customer service, attentiveness of staff that ask good questions to help you find what you want can make all the difference in a shopping experience. And often that can be the point of difference that a competitor will offer, attracting customers into their shops rather than your own. Events are definitely something to think about. Ways of generating sales peaks and otherwise flat periods. In the card and gift industry, which is the basis of where I work, of course we have spring seasons, Valentine's, Mother's Day, Easter and Father's Day. And they automatically create peaks for the business, which are really important to understand. And although as a card and gift retailer, of course I'm expected to have that type of a product offer, I still need to think very seriously about how much I can afford to spend on those products, what space I will give them, the messaging I put in the window. And in creating the space for that product, actually what other lines am I going to have to take off sale for that period that may actually suffer as a consequence? So even though I know I need to have product available to sell over that period, I still need to be thinking really long and hard about how that balance is going to work within my business. And that applies to any retailer or indeed supplier. How much money can you afford to spend on that offer, and what compromises do you need to make in order to be able to do so? And if they are the givens within our spring seasons, what about the other seasons that we need to have a think about? I think Easter is a really interesting one in this, because the emphasis on Easter is changing hugely. Given that it happens in March or April, it's also a fantastic way of changing the feel of your shop, because the colour palette you can use on product and displays. So it can be a really strong way of actually signalling a step change in your shop, even if actually as a season it's not massively relevant to your business. And it's quite interesting if you walk down high streets, even to look at people like opticians who really make the most of these opportunities to signal a change in what they're offering in store, and just to make their windows look more exciting. One of the biggest events that we've had to contend with in retail over the last couple of years has actually been Black Friday, which came from the States. It was all about online selling. But as it's developed in the UK, the implications for retail high street sellers has been significant. While the main focus was on high-priced items, the noise that's been created around it and the impact of this massive discounting event has really changed consumers' behaviour at that time of year, waiting for those big discounts on those items before actually spending on other areas of the retail business. Last year, you'll have noticed on the high streets that even though retailers are finding it very difficult to get involved in that as a one-day event, it was becoming a 4, 5 or 6 day event starting on the Wednesday or Thursday and running through to the Monday or Tuesday of the following week, because that was the only way that actually it made sense for a high street retailer to get involved. By the time you've put point of sale up, you've marked down the products that you want to reduce and so on, to do it for 1 or 2 days just isn't viable. But in making that decision to take part in something like Black Friday, of course, it's not just about having point of sale in your window. You need to know that you can afford to take those markdowns on that product, and that in offering those discounts, consumers are going to buy enough of that product to still make that event profitable for you. So it's not just about wanting to be involved, it's also knowing that you can afford to be involved. And that applies to any event that you do, be it buying Valentine's stock, Mother's Day stock, or running a promotion. You need to have done those calculations to understand what it is you can afford to spend, how much of a discount it is you can afford to give, and what sales uplift you need to see if actually that's going to make a sales and profit impact on your business. So events are absolutely critical. You need to have them in your calendar, but you need to know that you can afford to do them. It'll be very interesting to see actually how 2016 delivers Black Friday and who wants to get involved in it this year. My hunch is it will be very different from what we saw in 2015. But there are other events that are coming at us from across the waters. Apparently we have Singles Day heading towards us from China, which is the second week of November. On a more national level, we have a Small Business Saturday, which is the first weekend of December. And I would suggest that is actually a much more viable type of event to get involved in, because if your local high street, your local business area, wherever you're based, is actually putting some money behind that type of promotion, then it's much more relevant to your customers than some of these bigger international events. Of course, one of the big ones that's really affected us this year has been Rio. And although the Olympics haven't started quite yet, everything that we've been seeing at trade fairs this summer has told us, has been influenced by the colours and the vibrancy of the Olympics being in Rio this year. And it won't have escaped you even walking around here today, although a lot of you will have bought this product now months ago, that flamingos, cocktails, all the imagery that goes with that big, fun party time in Rio has been really, really strong this season. And it's really important to get involved in that, even if it's not directly relevant to your product category. Using those colours and that imagery on the product that you're offering can make a real difference to how people perceive you as a retailer. And if you were walking down a high street this weekend, you will have noticed that Joy's windows are full of inflatable flamingos and pineapples now that the sale is over. So they're getting in on the act and having a lot of fun with the way they're portraying those events. Although the product in store that links to it is relatively limited, the windows look great. Online is absolutely critical to us here in the UK. Earlier this year, John Lewis said that by 2019, their sales online would be greater than the sales they take in store, which is an extraordinary idea when you think how successful they are as a high street retailer. But trading online isn't right for everyone, and I would urge you to think very long and hard before you take that step. It isn't something that you have to do to be successful. But if you are going to do it, you need the time and the money to invest in it to make it a success. If you're a supplier, things like Not on the High Street and Etsy are becoming absolutely vital as you grow your business, to make sure that actually you have a share of voice in terms of online sales. And even for retailers now, portals are starting to develop to give smaller retailers a share of voice, both nationally and locally. So if it's something that you think you want to be involved in but don't want to take that step initially yourselves, it's definitely worth looking at what's available locally to do that. But of course, will spend again at that point. Certainly for John Lewis, that represents about 30% of those coming in to click and collect product will spend again. And if you're standing in a queue at a lot of retailers, you will often see somebody coming in to collect a parcel and spend again, even if it's unrelated to your particular outlet. So that is a way of taking the benefit without having to have an online offer yourselves. A lot of the business improvement districts around the UK, the BIDs, also offering ways of allowing businesses to get involved online. So it's definitely worth researching that. One of the interesting impacts of this move to online shopping is consumers' perception of when they need to think about making purchases. If you were involved in the mail order business about 5 years ago, it was quite normal for a delivery period to be 28 days. And on that basis, the peak for those businesses was the middle of November in terms of receiving orders, because people wanted to make sure they had their product available for Christmas. With the development of online, of course, that has changed completely. And now we're down to sort of 48 hours as being quite a long time for the delivery of something. And that has knocked on to people's perceptions of when they need to shop in retail as well. And certainly over the last couple of years, things like the sale of Christmas cards are beginning to move in terms of when that peak starts to lift. And I would have suggest that based on the information from the Greeting Card Association, that's probably moved back by about 2 weeks now in terms of the lift of greeting card sales. And you could say, well, there's no significance to me in that. Well, there may not be, but then just think about if you're condensing down your everyday cards that much too soon and putting your Christmas cards out, are you potentially losing sales of those everyday cards for that 2-week period? So all of these things are worth considering as people make their changes in shopping habits. They can have implications on your business. Mobile devices and social media. A lot of people don't want to get involved with transactional websites. They don't think they're right for them. And I wouldn't for a moment suggest that this is something that you should do if you don't feel this is a way you really want to develop your business. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have some sort of an online presence. Even if it's just a very vibrant and regularly updated landing page with your business's name on, pictures of new product that's being introduced, so that while people are travelling to and from work, they're sitting on the sofa and just doing a bit of research in the evenings, they can actually see your business, they can see the new product that's available, and it can encourage them to take an interest and become loyal to your business and your brand. It doesn't mean you have to have a transactional site at all, but it does mean it needs to be something that you are happy to update regularly. But it is a way of creating a presence and a loyalty to your business that is definitely worth considering if you want to remain competitive alongside others that are out there doing it. And you can do it in several ways. It can be a landing page on a website. It could be that you're very active on Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest. Instagram, all of those methods are ways of getting a share of voice in this mobile world that we all need to understand. My next slide is just about how the face of the high street has changed this year already. We're only in July, and already we have seen 3 big names leave the high street. And what's really interesting about this, for me, is the different types of businesses that are actually reflected here. Obviously, there are a huge amount of issues behind this, and there's one that's particularly controversial at the moment in terms of how the business was potentially managed. But I don't want to touch on any of that. Actually, this is about staying relevant to your customer. And for me, understanding these social, economic, and business trends is actually about maintaining that relevance all the way through. 2 of these businesses, BHS and Austin Reed, are well-established, long-standing businesses with great reputations in their market. But you could argue that actually they lost sight of what their customers wanted from them and didn't maintain that relevance. And that's why they found it so difficult towards the end. But the My Local is a completely different scenario. This is a brand that launched relatively recently, only in the last couple of years, in direct response to this little and often trend of shopping that I highlighted to you earlier. And yet they have struggled too. Reading the reports and knowing a couple of the branches myself, I would suggest that actually they hadn't really understood what their customers wanted from them either, in terms of breadth of range and pricing and service. Sad to see all these spaces on our high street, and a real issue for all of us in terms of needing new people to come in and fill that space to keep our high streets vibrant and interesting. But all 3 very different reasons for why they didn't succeed, but all around this thing about being relevant and understanding trends and what our customers want from us. Changes in legislation, yes, we're all subject to it. We don't have any choice in which bits really work for us, or rather rarely have any choice. The one that I've put up there at the top, of course, is carrier bag charging. We've got used to that now. Introduced here in England in October last year, but obviously in Scotland earlier, and Scotland and Wales earlier than that. This was one where you did have a choice about whether you implemented it or not, depending on your size. Someone with under 250 employees could choose whether they were going to charge or not. The critical thing here is that actually the charges are being reinvested in charities. And so actually it's a really good example of how you can raise your profile locally by even being a small business, but deciding that you wanted to be involved with a local charity that you really believed in, and taking that opportunity to create a really positive story about the business links and the support that you wanted to give them. Next on the slide is business rates, and this is massively contentious and has been for years. In the autumn statement last year, the Chancellor pledged that he would extend the relief for 600,000 small businesses, which is massively welcomed. But he also decided to end the support he was giving to a lot of small retailers in March 2016. Now, the thing about that is that either way, you need to know whether you're a business that's impacted by those sorts of changes to make sure that you're managing your costs accordingly and taking advantage of opportunities if you are going to get relief, and indeed reining in your spending if it's going to be cut. The minimum wage versus living wage debate rages on. Interestingly, one of the surveys done quite recently suggested that a lot of businesses weren't cutting the number of staff that they were employing as a result of this. They were either seeking to take lower profits themselves or pass the impact on pricing onto their customers. But one way or the other, something like this starts to set a perception about the salary that you're offering, so that when you go out into the market to recruit again, if within your local competitors you're offering significantly less than they are, it starts to impact on who will apply for your jobs. and indeed the quality of people that you can recruit. So while it needn't be an immediate issue for you, you do need to have an awareness of what local businesses are doing so that you are perceived positively within your local market and can attract the type of staff that you need. The next point that I've put on the slide is pensions. The new requirement for employers to offer all employees a pension was introduced back in 2012. It started with the largest businesses, but it's now filtering its way down and will be applicable to all employers by 2018. A lot of smaller businesses are just starting to have to think about this now. And if it's something that you haven't thought about yet, but you are an employer, if you do nothing else as a result of the points I'm raising this afternoon, can I ask you to go and check what is called your staging date, which is the date that you will be expected to start offering a pension to your staff. It's not the date that you start researching it, it's the date you are expected to start offering that benefit to them. And to find out what your staging date is, you go into the government website and you put in your PAYE reference, and it will give you a date. And by that date, you need to be ready. They are getting very hot on this, and a lot of small businesses are being caught out, and the fines are quite punitive. So please don't be caught out. Go and check what your staging date is if it's something that you haven't researched yet. The final point I've put on this slide is funding apprenticeships. This again was something that came out in the budget last year. Really positive in so many ways. This idea that apprenticeships are a way of younger people, in fact not just younger people, people learning practical skills that will qualify them and equip them from a much more practical point of view to take on new roles. Being funded by a 0.5% levy on larger businesses to help smaller businesses take on apprentices. Definitely something that's worth looking at. Those businesses that I know have got involved so far have found they've ended up with really loyal and well-trained teams who know exactly what is required within that business and found it a massively positive experience. So if that's something that would interest you, that's definitely worth looking into. And the schemes tend to be run locally. And finally, I wouldn't be able to do a session on social, economic and business trends without mentioning Brexit. Not because I have a crystal ball, as I mentioned earlier, but just because we need to start thinking about it. The immediate impacts we can see already. The effect on exchange rates. If you're about to go on holiday, you'll have seen that when you've gone to buy your currency, depending on where you're going. The exchange rates have changed already against the dollar and against the euro. For anybody buying product in from either Europe, America, or indeed the Far East, of course that has an immediate effect, unless you already had orders placed. It's interesting walking around the show even today. Some people are already putting up their prices. Others are saying that because the product was on order, they're going to hold them. But the reality is the product that we're buying for January is almost certainly going to be more expensive. But the other immediate impact, of course, is the effect on consumer demand. What will our shoppers be wanting to buy from us? What will it impact on their volumes? Or actually, for the moment, until we see the real effect of the change it's going to make, will it make little difference? In the recession in 2008, we found that the luxury end of the market was virtually unaffected. People just kept spending. They felt really quite immune to the whole thing. Who knows if that will be the case this time? But we did survive the 2008 recession. We're all still here trading. We're running our businesses. So there is nothing to say that we won't cope well with this once we understand what the framework is that we're being asked to trade within. And there won't be any clarity on that for years yet until we understand what the levies and so on may be for importing and exporting to and from European countries. There may be none at all. It's a complete guessing game at the moment. But it's going to be really critical that we're all watching it, thinking about it, and making sure that we understand the implications for our individual businesses so that we stay in front and we're planning well and we're maintaining as much profit as we possibly can.